Hey, Fearless friends, it's Amy Schmidt, and welcome to another episode of the Fearlessly Facing 50 and Beyond podcast. So, super excited today for our show, but I wanted to start by just giving a huge thanks to all of you that have written reviews. Amazing. I know that time is so valuable and so precious, and there are more than a million podcasts for you out there to listen to. So, thank you for popping in those earbuds and either taking a walk outside or cooking dinner or sharing it with a friend and taking time to write a review. Remember, you can find me on all the socials. You can find me on theamy.schmidt on Instagram. Also, Instagram, Fearlessly Facing 50, the F Word series. That's a new one, so you can follow me there. Or go ahead and follow along at the website, fearlesslyfacing50.com. And 50 is always spelled out. So I've got a great guest today. You know what? And we're going to be talking about the ultimate sleepover. As we fearlessly face that F word of future, we need our sleep. And today I've got the sleep goddess with us. Yep, exactly. That's what she's known as. And it's Dr. Andrea Matsumura. And we're going to be talking about this dream formula about how we can get better sleep. And we know that especially at this phase of life, if we are either perimenopausal or postmenopausal, sleep is so important. And the statistics around that, we're going to dig into all of it. So stay tuned for my episode and the podcast, Fearlessly Facing 50, with my guest, Dr. Andrea Matsumura. Well, welcome to the show today. I said a little bit in the intro about the fact that we are going to be having our best sleepover today. And I got to just start off, first of all, by welcoming Dr. Matsumura to the show today. I love your last name. I just said that. Matsumura. It's just beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to talk to your audience about sleep and specifically women and their sleep habits.
We're fearlessly facing our future health right here when we're talking about sleep. And, I think I may have mentioned this in the intro, but I'm going to just say it again because these statistics are unbelievable. You're 70% more accident prone if you're not sleeping well, 69% higher risk for cancer, and a reduced lifespan of 4.7 years if you're not getting good sleep. What is going on? That silly statement that says, "Oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead." That's not what we should be saying.
Yeah, there is so much data being published now around not getting enough sleep. So that study in particular, the one that reports up to 69% increased risk for cancer, that's a longitudinal study. It was a big population study done in China of 14,000 people. And
Wow.
Specifically what's important is that it focused on women. Women were at higher risk than men were if they did not get enough sleep. And there was this increased incidence of cancer within that population. And so it was a startling statistic for me to read through. And what it did for me is it made me realize that it's even more important for me to educate people, especially women who are in their menopausal phase of life, to really harness their sleep power and their potential because it lives within every single person. We just stop listening to our cues, and so then we have trouble sleeping.
We stop listening to our cues. I had Dr. Morgan on a few weeks ago, and we talked about heart health. And she said, a woman's first heart attack is most likely more fatal than a man's just because of the fact we put symptoms off for so long. We don't listen to our bodies. And I think this is the same type of thing around sleep. One thing I'd like to share is that my mom has passed, but she used to say, and I can remember so many times all the wonderful things she used to talk about, but I always remember my mom saying, I had a terrible night's sleep. I do my best work at night. I would get up. She would write letters in the middle of the night. She was not a good sleeper. And then I kind of think about it, and I can remember days in high school when I could hear her tiptoeing around, which might even mean that I'm not a good sleeper. And I don't think I am a good sleeper. But is there a genetic link to this?
So there is a genetic link in regards to the type of circadian rhythm that you have. So I developed this system where you can figure out what your archetype is. It's really just a way of figuring out what your circadian rhythm is. So we're all born with clock genes that live in the hypothalamus of the brain, and basically they're set for a particular time when your body wants to go to bed and when it wants to wake up. And that may not be in line with our societal norm. So some people are early birds, or what I call an Artemis. Some people are night owls, or what I call an Aphrodite. And then other people fall into societal norm, which are my Athenas. And societal norm is going to bed around 10, waking up at around 6, going to bed at 11, waking up at 7. Some people are night owls, and it sounds like your mom may have been a night owl. They want to go to bed after midnight. They want to wake up at 8. They want to go to bed at 1, wake up at 9. Society does not we don't plan for those type of folks unless we lived in a place like Spain or France, where the society wakes up later, right?
Yeah.
So then what happens is you have this person that's living in an earlier society, and then they develop sleep anxiety, and then they develop hypervigilance in their sleep. So they not only have a delayed circadian rhythm, they in addition develop insomnia because they don't want to miss waking up. So then they become hypervigilant in their sleep, and they're waking up all night long because they don't want to miss waking up the next day.
Wow, that's so interesting. Something sleep anxiety. We got to dig into that more. I think back to, having my kids being little, and I had a husband who traveled a lot, and so I would say, well, I'm just going to put them to bed later because then they'll sleep in more. And that always backfired. Mm-hmm. It always backfired.
Mm-hmm. Kids are typically, children are early to bed, early to rise. They require a whole lot more sleep. And generally speaking, they will wake up early. Although those night owls who are born with the later clock genes, they tend to follow that rhythm where they will say when they were little that they would hide under their covers and read books, or that they were having trouble going to sleep. But most of the time, kids need to wake up early, and it doesn't really matter how late you go to sleep. Your body clock will wake you up. So that's why people who are early birds, you tell them, hey, we have this, reservation at this wonderful restaurant, but it's not until 9, and they say, I'm out. I'm not going to go. I have to get up. I wake up naturally at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I am going to be falling over my food at 9:30. So they just don't ever go there.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's talk about this dream formula. I think this is amazing, and you've developed this. I mean, this is all science. Oh, I see your little dog back there.
So there's my dog.
I love it. Hey, it's real life, and that's what's awesome. Yeah. Let's talk about this. Can you walk me through the dream formula? Because I was reading about it. It's incredible.
Yeah. So, it's the work that pretty much every sleep medicine physician does. I just kind of developed it for my own, this method, because it allows me to teach people how complex sleep really is. We are always looking for quick solutions, and especially with social media, there are all these quick fixes online, thinking that, well, if I just do this one thing, my sleep is going to be completely fixed. But it's more complex than that. So DREAM is the acronym that stands for your daytime activities. So what are you doing during the day that may be affecting your sleep? Then your resting environment. Believe it or not, lots of people have issues with their resting environment not being ideal. It might be too loud, or they have too many lights on, or they have a TV in their bedroom, or their phone in their bedroom. Then E stands for emotions. We all struggle with bringing our anxiety to bed sometimes. And then A is your archetype. So what is your circadian rhythm? And then the last one is M, stands for medical conditions. And there's many medical conditions that can affect one's sleep. There's lots of chronic issues that people do not realize can affect your sleep. One of them is becoming menopausal. And if you have a change in your hormones, then that can certainly affect your sleep, because estrogen and progesterone play a role in how melatonin works in our brain. So
we have melatonin in our brain right now. Without taking melatonin, we have it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So we naturally produce melatonin from the pineal gland about 4 hours before we actually go to sleep. So it is what we call a chronobiotic. It is not a sleep inducer. It is sold, supplements are not regulated, so you can pretty much sell anything. That's not to say that supplements are bad. You just need to be cautious. It's caveat emptor. You have to
Yeah.
really know what you're buying. And so there's all of these doses of melatonin that are out for sale over the counter, and we really shouldn't be taking high doses of melatonin at bedtime. We make it in picograms. It is sold in milligrams. That's 10 to the sixth greater power.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a fun fact. If I'm ever on Jeopardy, I'm going to pull that one out of my back pocket. That's fascinating. Well, and I think when you're talking about supplements and you scroll through social media, and a lot of women are doing this that are postmenopausal or perimenopausal or whatever age, and they're looking at, a type of mushroom that makes you sleep, or a type of sleep gummy, or a type of Advil PM, and then they'll take two because one didn't work, and then they're groggy. I mean, we're hearing it all the time. So, proceed with caution around that for sure, what you're ordering. But let's talk about is there a sleep routine that we all should be doing as women that are, menopausal? Is there something we should be doing every night that would be
Yeah.
consistent, that would create better sleep for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite basic, but a lot of people actually do not follow this. So the first thing is to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day. And it sounds simple. However, a lot of people actually don't do that. They might stay up later on the weekends or whatever their day off is. They may go to bed later or stay in bed later. And our brains really like routine. Our brain likes to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. Then you want to make sure that your room is dark, cool, and quiet. A lot of people have electronics in their bedroom. I like to say we have too much light in our life. So we need to actually put away electronics an hour before bed. You want to develop a routine. Another analogy I provide is, when we're hungry, we don't just open the refrigerator door and start shoveling food in our mouth, right? We plan a meal, right? We say we're going to be hungry. I'm going to prepare food, or I'm going to go to a restaurant, and it takes time to get the food. You're preparing yourself to eat. We have to prepare our brains for sleep. So we
Wow.
can't just go, 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 and then plop into bed and expect our brain to say, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. You can, if you're chronically sleep deprived, your brain is going to be starved for sleep, and then you may go to sleep easily. But most of us really need a wind down period. The other thing is making sure that you are understanding how your body reacts to food, to alcohol, to caffeine. You should not be drinking caffeine at least 6 hours before bed. It actually does have alerting effects. And when people say that, well, I can drink an entire cup of coffee and go right to bed, that just proves to me that you're chronically sleep deprived.
Really? Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'm sharing that with my husband, who will order a double espresso at dinner and be like, "Oh yeah," but he does fall asleep. But that is interesting, and I think it's so true. You have to put some thought into it. Now, I'm just thinking back to the other night when I watched The White Lotus, which I'm
Yeah.
watching that right now with my husband, and we watched it before we went to bed. And then, of course, I'm wide awake talking about it because I'm so intrigued by the show and who did what. And
Uh-huh.
that was dumb. Like, I should have shut that down an hour before.
Yeah, you don't want to read something that's extremely entertaining or stressful, right? Right now, I don't want to watch the news before I go
Right.
to bed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
You don't want to watch some sort of horror flick or something that, everybody's different. Some people may say, in fact, that listening to heavy metal music before bed relaxes them. Great. The point is that you want to do something that relaxes your brain and provides some sort of soothing technique, if
Yeah.
you will,
Yeah.
that then prepares you for sleep. And that's different for everybody.
So if you're waking up, like, going to bed, say you're going to bed at 10 and you're waking up every day at 7, that kind of means without an alarm. That means you're probably doing stuff right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing for people to, that are watching and listening. If they're getting into that rhythm of going to bed and waking up without an alarm, right? That's showing that they're getting enough sleep. Is that true?
Yes. Most people, if you give yourself enough hours of sleep, you're going to naturally wake up around 7 to 9 hours later. Everybody knows what their set point is. Some people only need 7, some people need a little more than 8. You kind of know what your body needs.
Yeah.
But most of us don't give ourselves enough sleep, what I call sleep opportunity. We are burning the candle at both ends. We're trying to wake up earlier than our body wants to wake up, and we're going to bed later than our body wants to go to bed.
Yep. Interesting. Let's dig into 2 other things. One is sleep apnea. There's all sorts of funny skits now on SNL, and there was a movie, I think, with, I can't remember who it was, but, they had their sleep apnea masks and all of that.
Wine country.
Yes, it was. Is this something that is more common with menopausal women? Because I read that somewhere, and I don't know if there's science to back that up. But is sleep apnea really a thing?
Oh yeah, sleep apnea is really a thing. Unfortunately, it's been consumerized for quick fixes in the media. There's always this oral appliance that's going to work. Really, somebody needs to be evaluated officially by a clinician or a physician who understands how to interpret a sleep study. So 9 out of 10 women who are postmenopausal do not know that they have sleep apnea because women do not present the same way as men do. So much like everything else in medicine, the screening tools that we use to help determine risk for people, women don't fit into those boxes because most of the screening tools that are developed with men in mind. So they didn't test women. So women don't typically have loud snoring or have a bed partner that says, oh my gosh, I'm hearing that person stop breathing, or they're snoring really loudly. Women typically have fragmented sleep, wake up feeling tired, or what we call having malaise. They don't know why they feel bad, but they do. They may wake up with headaches. And they sometimes say things like, I don't know if I'm depressed because I'm tired, or I'm tired because I'm depressed.
Oh, wow.
So it's way less specific, these symptoms around women and sleep apnea. Why is this important? Because sleep apnea is potentially a risk factor for heart attacks and strokes.
I have read that. So for women listening, should they be asking their primary care doctor to have a sleep study, or how would they begin that process?
So the first thing is figuring out what is causing poor sleep. And so that's why I developed the DREAM method, because you have to unpack a lot. It's not, well, are you getting enough hours of sleep? Most people will say they're not getting enough hours of sleep, but it's all of those pieces to figure out, do I need to have a sleep study? Because not everybody needs a sleep study. So you have to really, again, ask a lot of questions. It's all about the person's history. That's where I get all of the details to determine whether or not somebody really needs a sleep study or not. If you go down the path of sleep study, most insurance companies will only allow what is called a type 3 home sleep apnea test. Most insurance companies do not approve a type 1 study, which is in the sleep center sleep study. Why am I bringing that up? Because there are more false negatives in women in home sleep study testing. So if you have a lot of symptoms and it sounds like you might be at moderate to high risk for sleep apnea, and you have a home sleep study or a type 3, then that is room for you to, if that comes back negative, there may be room for you to actually then move forward with an in-lab sleep study. Wow. So a lot of people will say, well, I got tested and I'm negative. And I have seen this over and over again, that women have mild sleep apnea but it is really severe during dream sleep, or what we call REM sleep. And it's much more difficult to capture on a home study or a type 3. There's a different type of study called a type 2 sleep study that is more likely to capture that data, and you don't have to sleep somewhere else.
Oh,
But hardly
interesting.
anybody uses those types of studies.
Okay. Okay.
And so it's more, again, it's more complex than people think. People want to have a sleep study done, and they kind of come in sometimes ordering it like they're at a fast food restaurant. And so what my response to that is similar to if you have an injury of a joint, you don't know what you need. Do you need an x-ray? Do you need an MRI? Do you need a CAT scan? We don't know what we have to talk to you first to figure out what type of diagnostic study you need. It's the same thing with sleep. It's not that a home study is going to be great for everyone. We might have to look further and do a
Right.
different type of study.
So interesting. There are these TikTok crazes where, people are taping their mouths at night. So they're, I mean, all of these crazy
Okay.
things that people are doing. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's just so interesting around sleep apnea. And and it's also something that you shouldn't put off and you shouldn't be embarrassed about. If you have sleep apnea and you're a woman, then, take the right course of action to help you so it
Right.
doesn't, result in a stroke or heart attack.
Right. And there are other methods to treat sleep apnea outside of continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP. There are oral appliances. However, again, you want to have that full conversation to understand what type of sleep apnea you have, because the one that everybody knows about is simple obstructive sleep apnea. But there are different types of sleep apnea that people don't really realize that are out there. And then you want to figure out what is the best treatment for
Right.
you.
Right.
My one PSA today is please don't use don't use tape if you think that you are helping yourself because you're snoring, because you may in fact be causing your body to have worse apnea if you're taping your mouth because you're trying to prevent snoring.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because and that's what people are going to. They're going to social media for answers to these things. And, there's no scientific research to back it, and it's dangerous. I've got on with me today Dr. Andrea Matsumura. You can find her. I'll link everything in the episode notes, but it's sleepgoddessmd.com. There's a great quiz on there that you can take to find out your sleep archetype, which I think is amazing. We're digging into a lot today, and there's a lot of questions, so I will have that in the episode notes so you can reach out to her directly, because I think sleep is so important. And, we undervalue it, I think, way too much. And not prioritizing it as we should. Let's talk about naps. A lot of people say power naps. I'll take a 20-minute power nap and I still sleep great. Are naps important? Should we be taking a nap every day?
So it all depends, right? So if you're using a nap to make up for not getting enough sleep at night, then no. You need to just figure out how to give yourself more hours of sleep. If you want to take a quick nap, the recommendation is 20 minutes, at most 30 minutes. That can be helpful, it can be restorative. But if you're using it to make up for not getting enough sleep, then no. So it's a little bit of both. In those later societies, in Spain, they use naps because they aren't getting enough sleep at night. So they built this into their culture so that they can get enough hours of sleep. So a lot of people will come to me and say, well, this society takes naps, and I'll say they're also eating dinner at 9 o'clock at night. If you go and try to eat dinner at 5 or 6, they look at you funny.
Yes, right.
Their society runs later, but people still get up early. So they built in this middle of the day rest period to make up for not getting enough sleep at night.
Yeah. Have we always trended this? I mean, is this a new trend that we're just not sleeping as well? I mean, in the 1960s, if we look at data, were we sleeping more sound?
Yes. So we were getting better sleep. Really, the advent of handheld electronic devices has fast forwarded our inability to get enough sleep. And when you really look at the pre-Victorian era, so when we were using candles, people went to sleep when the candles blew out because it was dark. Another example is that people will tell me that they get their best sleep when they go camping because they're going to sleep when the sun goes down and they're waking up when the sun comes up.
That's interesting. Wow. And it makes sense.
So, yeah, because we push our bedtimes too late is what happens for most of us.
Yeah, we're staying up too late. We're trying. Yeah, exactly. Another question I had, and this is from somebody that actually wrote in because I said I was doing something around sleep. She asked about dreams, and she said, I get so frustrated. She's a twin. And she said, I'm 56 years old. I have a twin sister, and we talk every day. And she remembers every dream she ever has had. And I don't remember any. Why is that?
So, dreaming is different for everyone. Because you don't remember your dreams does not mean that you're not dreaming. We absolutely need to dream in order to survive, because REM sleep, that's our dream state, is when we are cleaning all the waste products out of our brain for the day. And so a lot of people will think that because they do not remember their dreams, they're not dreaming. Well, they did do studies on rats, and after about 6 to 8 weeks, the rats pretty much imploded. They'll never do these studies on humans. But that's because that's when we are cleaning out those waste products, but we're also doing all the muscle repair, all of the repair in the body. And if we're not getting dream sleep, then we will basically, our immune system shuts down, all the repair mechanisms in the body stop working. It can be frustrating, sure, but I try to allay people's fear and say, you're here talking to me today, that tells me that you're dreaming.
Interesting.
Because you're alive.
You're alive. Yeah. Doctor, walk me through when this really happened for you, when you were like, you know what, this is very interesting to me. Now, I think you're double board certified. And I'm sorry, I don't have your bio right in front of me open on my computer. But
that's all right.
But when did you become so passionate about this?
So I trained as an internal medicine doc, so a doctor for adults. And after about 12 years of practicing and trying to manage people's chronic medical conditions, so diabetes, hypertension, abnormal heart rhythms, chronic muscle pain, I realized that at the end of every appointment, most people would say, I'm not getting good sleep. Can I get a sleep aid? And so for years, I was typically providing people with a sleep aid. That is the absolute wrong thing that we should be doing. So you talked about White Lotus, that lorazepam? No. No lorazepam.
Exactly.
So I kind of had this epiphany that sleep was the core of what was missing. It makes everything else harder to manage in your life. And so then I went back to school, midlife crisis, if you will. I don't know. I was in my 40s and I went back to school to do a fellowship in sleep medicine. And I've been practicing sleep medicine ever since. And it is quite rewarding when I'm able to talk with someone about the fact that sleep is the juggernaut for everything else to fall into place in their life. It just makes things easier to manage if you're getting quality sleep.
Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense. Oh, I applaud you for that. I admire you even more. I mean, that's amazing. I love that part of the story. You went back to school, you studied this, you knew it was important, it was on your heart, and you made it happen, and you're changing lives for people. Do you work with people all over the country if they reach out on the website, which I'll have, put in the episode notes here?
Yeah. So right now I am seeing people mostly in Oregon. That's where I live. I am working on getting a multi-state, interstate license.
Fabulous.
To be able to see people in more states. But I do consulting otherwise. So I consult with companies or do workshops for people. I have done a workshop for other practitioners to teach other practitioners about sleep. So that's really what I'm focusing on now is public
Wonderful.
speaking.
Yep, that's great. And so I'll have everything there in the notes. We touched on it briefly. I've got two things left to ask you before we go because this is just fascinating, and there's some great takeaways for our listeners today. We talked a little bit about the importance of a routine. So if there's a woman today that's listening and has really struggled around sleep, and she's listening and saying, "Yeah, I'm doing that and that and that. I'm doing that wrong." What are 3 things she can do tonight to start working toward better sleep?
So the first thing is if you're using any electronics, make sure that you turn all electronics off an hour before bed. The other piece is to make sure that your sleeping environment is optimal. So make sure that if it's too cold or if it's too warm, that you feel comfortable. Make sure that it's dark, and make sure that if you like to use an eye mask, explore what makes me feel comfortable, what makes me feel cozy in my bed. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is take a look at what you're doing throughout the day. Are you winding down? Are you allowing yourself to prepare for sleep? Do you have sleep anxiety? That's something to then explore. Maybe you didn't make the connection and realize that you're bringing this desire to sleep and the anxiety of not getting sleep into your bed, and then it's kind of this little cycle that you have developed that you didn't realize. So exploring what is happening during the day that you're bringing into your bed that may be affecting your sleep.
Those are great things we can do. Thank you. I wanted to dive more into sleep anxiety. We'll have to get into that next time.
Yeah.
So great. The last question I want to ask you is something I ask everybody. And if you were sitting on the couch and you looked over and there you were at 30, what advice would you give yourself? What advice would you give your younger self?
Well, the advice I would give my younger self is to be more direct, and have less F's to give to people. I mean,
Yep.
after this is all about, living after 50. By the time I reached 50, and I think that's too old, I just had no more F's left in my jar. And I basically stopped putting up with people's bad behavior that society allows people to have, for women especially. And it has actually served me quite well.
I like that. That is a mic drop and a great way to end this. Thank you for that. I applaud what you're doing. So many great nuggets in there and takeaways around sleep that are so important. And, it needs to be a priority. At this phase of life, you kind of hit at that at the end. We have got to treat ourselves as a guest of honor. We've worked hard. We've earned this. And we can't say, I'm going to sleep when I'm dead. No, that's silly.
No.
We have to have good quality sleep every night to enhance our health and our longevity and everything. So thank you for just all your wisdom today. I learned so much. I took a zillion notes. So I really appreciate your time.